who's the co-founder and managing partner of the Digital Health Coalition. I know a lot of you are very familiar with the DHC. Mark's organization has been very prevalent in these types of discussions over the years. And this final session that we have got this afternoon, it's a series of mini segments and talks followed by a kind of a group panel, if I'm understanding things correctly, from Mark. So we're going to be discussing multi-channel to omni-channel to CX, what's ahead for pharma innovation, obviously big picture covering the full gamut here. Alongside Mark, during the sessions at various segments, we have Dr. Ashish Rama, who's right in front of me here, Tanya Shapley from ZS, Isabel, again, is going to be joining this session from a patient perspective, and also Corbina Rafum at Amgen from a little bit more from the HCP side of things. So there's kind of a bit more of an all-rounder approach to this. Kicking us off is obviously Mark's going to speak and present the first part of the segment, followed by Tanya, then with a Q&A with Dr. Rana, and a general discussion at the end with Isabel and Corbina, if my memory, if
you explained it better than I ever could have. So
it's been rolling over the mind for a few.
I was going to try and make some comment that we're dealing with attention deficit, less the hyperactivity right now. So we're going to try and do rapid fire sessions of 10 to 12 minutes to keep everyone mentally engaged. And we're going to close it out with a panel, a little bit of a quasi town hall. Wrap up, if you will, kind of bringing together a lot of the elements. So when I spoke with Simon, not to disclose too much, but it was a few weeks ago, we were chatting about some different ideas for some sessions for a final. And I said, why don't we talk about kind of this arc of the maturity curve of CX? And part of my thinking was, influenced by a project we did earlier this year when we were looking at kind of the stages of omni-channel, which is so funny. I was talking with the doctor right here about, we're going to do a discussion. He said, what is omni-channel? He kind of chuckled inside. It's like, we hear it 10 times a day. And we looked at omni-channel, and it was interesting where we kind of went through this maturity model and staging, where you heard a lot of the talk about what's that evolution of multi-channel to omni-channel. But then we also heard a lot of companies referencing this integration from omni-channel to CX. And in some ways, some companies looked at, CX as kind of enlightened omni-channel, if you will, right? It's kind of nirvana when you turn on the feedback loop, when you actually start listening to what your customers are saying, and you've got kind of a feedback loop in place with omni-channel. So I said, let me just talk for a few minutes up front before I turn it over. And there is a little method to the madness. Tanya's going to talk about the patient experience. Doctor's obviously going to talk about the doctor's experience. We're going to have a little kind of fireside chat, and then we'll close it up with bringing Isabel back for the patient experience, and then Corbina for the physician experience as a closing panel. So to start off with, earlier this year, we went out and talked to pharma about kind of some of the big picture CX trends. So I'll just share a few slides and insights from that. I will start by saying Oz and I apparently have the same fascination with Cartoonist. This was submitted yesterday. I did not cheat. But I like this one in the sense of, and I'll kind of reason why I came to this, of how often have we heard right person, right message, right time, right? Some of you out there are too young, right? But if you go back a few years, there was a little thing about 20 years ago called CRM. Yeah, 20 years ago, right? And the whole CRM mantra and everything about that was right person, right message, right time. It was the exact same phrase, literally. We didn't have the technology, we didn't have the data, but we were struggling with these models of how do we get closer to the customer? How do we capture the right data? How do we figure out what the next stage is? Well, here's a pretty generic, this is actually from Acquia, but kind of a very generic kind of CX maturity curve. What do you see on there, right? What's in the top right? It's sort of CX as enlightened omni-channel. So if we think about this idea of CRM was the idea, we got to get close to the customer, we need to get the data, we need these massive data warehouses, 360. Everything was 360 20 years ago, right? We got to build these things to know what everything is happening. Multi-channel, we've heard that term frequently throughout the day, right? I think Oz actually used the example of when someone comes in and explains their omni-channel strategy by showing the multi-channel efforts individually. Multi-channel, we had now 10, 15, 20 channels available to us, and we started executing very well within those. Omni starts to speak to this idea of orchestration, right? Now we see a lot of those on the field force side of business, on the sales side. It's all about orchestration, making sure someone brilliantly is conducting that music so it actually makes sense to the end customer, okay? When we look at this and we say, what's beyond that? Well, we're going to talk about CX today, and we're going to talk a lot about experience for the next roughly like kind of 40 minutes. We did this earlier this year, and I'm going to just ask you to focus your attention on the top of the CX. We did a lot of trends earlier this year where we kind of let the industry give a report card. This was fascinating to me because we had the industry grade itself, and again, it's like that Lake Wobegon, you know, everyone's above average, but the reality is we're all average. When we look and we ask industry to rate itself, it gave really good marks to CX. I'm going to counter this with a study we did earlier this year when we asked physicians to rate their CX experience. 1 in 4 physicians rated their CX experience as positive. And that's not a negative thing. I think it's just a reality check. We framed it on the idea of, are you receiving personalized content relevant information? That's not the majority of physicians saying they're getting that from pharma today, right? That predictive relationship, the bones of CX. But we think we're doing fairly well as an industry. In fact, only 1 in 4 give a D or F on a report card perspective. What do we see in terms of what is interesting? And again, it's why we're at a Pharma CX Summit, why there's a lot of CX conversations this year. When we looked at what's interesting to you this year and how that changed from last year, CX is top of the list, right? It's top of mind. It's what we talk about internally. We're still saying omni-channel, but we're talking a lot about how CX is integrated. But I would challenge everyone in this room to talk about, and I know Tanya's going to talk about some of the patient side. I know what Doctor's going to talk about, Ash is going to talk about in terms of what an HCP does. We still got a lot of work to do if we're talking true CX. It's a true feedback loop. It's actually predictive, right? You're giving me what I want before I have to tell you. We're not there yet as an industry. We're getting there. We're making progress. If you break it down in terms of, rate your interest in customer experience, again, this is across pharma. This is a large study across, top pharma out there. Again, I mentioned the 48%, another 36. It's very hard to find a company in top 50 pharma that's not doing something or interested in the topic of CX today. And in fact, when you look at where it's more interesting, I showed you that 56% number, same level of interest at 38. There's no one who's going less. No one is saying we're spending less time on CX as a topic. So with that, I was trying to do a little bit of kind of setting you up for that curve of the multi-channel to the omni-channel to the CX and how this all comes together as a phase. But let's also understand our history so we can understand the future about where we're going and what we've been doing and how we're using data. We've done some work with Tanya in the past. She's got a book out as well. I'll plug that for her. Highly recommend reading it on patient experience. Has some great insights on kind of bringing this together of how does digital impact that patient experience. And we're going to do a seamless handoff for the slides. I'm going to leave the clicker here for you. And yes, I still call it a clicker. And I'll let you go for the patient experience.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. So as we do the changeover, Tanya Shefley, I am one of our leads of digital patient experience and services at ZS. Many of you probably didn't know that we had. Oh, yep. Let me go back one. Oh, that didn't seem to work. Patient centricity and bringing models and classic business cases to the market. So there's a collective from ZS that wrote the book last year, and it is out on Amazon, but I can definitely provide copies for those who are interested. I'll stay front and center with the microphone. So thinking about a lot of the conversations that have been happening today, obviously we are aligned that there is a shifting value proposition within our industry. In the past, we've been very benefits and features focused in talking to our customers and to our patients. A lot of what we heard today in the present is much more experiential, right? Really focused on those patient journeys, where are the points of friction, where do we create the best interventions. But looking forward, where we see the industry growing is much more about being outcomes focused and helping patients get the most out of the therapies. We can certainly learn a lot from other industries around those experiences about how to make it seamless and more consistent for patients through that experience. But I also really enjoyed the conversation about connecting those human resources, right, as part of that. Many of our human resources are marred in complex workflows that are mostly siloed, repetitive, and not helping patients actually get to therapy quickly. And that's where those outcomes move towards. And so in order to kind of help organizations get there and think about that experience, we'll talk about kind of what that maturity is, what are the capabilities underpinning those organizations who are at the leading edge. And most of those are crafting the patient experience with a product mindset, right, that allows for that differentiation in the offering for what they need today. So thinking about all those capabilities and technologies that come together, leaders really need to marry technology powered by data and actions in order to deliver that right message at the right time in the right channel. I laughed at the CRM comment. I grew up on the agency side at Wunderman, who was the originator, Lester Wunderman, of CRM, and being able to deliver that. That is the same thing of where we are today and leading to AI and ML models to help do that. So the technologies or capabilities, I should say, that underpin this that leaders should be looking at is that integrated technology stack. Agile business processes, along with governance, structures for governance, powered by really performance metrics that are then underpinned by ML and getting to AI. So those are really kind of the core three that underpin this kind of product mindset to be able to deliver on that. But organizations aren't all at the same stage of their maturity. And there are a variety of pathways that we see available, kind of archetypes in the marketplace, to approach that product engagement and services to help improve patient outcomes. For ZS, we see these kind of three main archetypes really in there. There are kind of four different chunkings of capabilities or groupings that we bring together. But the first one that I'll unpack is that enablement through technology and analytics. These companies are that platform mindset. They're bringing together first-party data, patient-level data, and they're finding new insights and new journey kind of splinters and segments based on that data and the technology that they're doing more from a modular perspective and delivering iteratively to continue to build their maturity. These organizations are shifting the ways of working and some of the strategies that those organizations are bringing to market to impact that patient experience. Other organizations in kind of that middle archetype are leading with design and process. I think that's much of the conversation that we've seen today. What is the patient journey? Where are we intervening? How do we make that more seamless and connected for them? They're looking across the board. This is where omnichannel really fits in. And all of these capabilities, how are we nudging the organization forward? How are we making that experience easier for patients and really getting them engaged? The last archetype are leading with strategy and ways of working. We actually see this more in kind of emerging pharma organizations or rare disease organizations who are really focused on the ways of working. Most of their experience and services are outsourced. So they rely on that with their vendors. They hearken back to what is that central vision that we have and trying to get all of those vendors aligned, identifying what data they have available to them. So you kind of see that technology and data lagging a little bit in this model because they're beholden to the vendors that they're working with. So they're looking for other pathways to enrich that experience. I'll double click quickly into the technology and analytics archetype. You know, as those interactions increase and solutions evolve to start to include that personalization and predictive interactions. I know that's kind of been talked a lot today, and I wanted to break down those pieces, right? First, from a kind of picking on patient services, is that measurement, really understanding the services that are most germane to patients, which are helping them the most. Then developing that data warehouse, bringing all of that data together, that patient-level data, patient support data, your specialty pharmacy data, all of that interaction data. That's where we can kind of get to algorithms and predictive behavior. Your organization can't jump to AI right away and start doing that with your programs. It is based on this stepping approach with ongoing measurement. And that's where we truly see the personalization of content, channel and cadence coming to play and getting to those individualized experiences, going through those first three steps of bringing that data together and being able to be led in that manner. That moves on to getting more sophisticated in using AI or ML. In certain therapy areas, getting to AI isn't honestly a pathway because we have such small numbers, especially in rare disease. You're really relying kind of more on machine learning and looking at those aggregate insights. But regardless of what pathway you're on, All those leading organizations are really looking to develop their patient experience quotient. And it brings together three elements. That EQ, right? This is really understanding from the patients, what is the adaptability of your experience, the satisfaction, the ease of moving through that, really sensing that coming from the patients. The second is VQ. That's the voice of customer that's been talked about. It's measuring the here and now. How is the patient going through that experience? Did they get what they need? What is the satisfaction in that moment? Again, increasing our listening quotient with them. And then the last is that IQ, that engagement data, bringing all of your data together, first party, second party, third party. This is where we want to see the history of what patients have gone through in their treatment approach to be able to enrich those experience. And these are where the most mature organizations are bringing together this patient experience quotient to improve patient outcomes and really being able to get to be predictive and intervening for patients. Thank you.
If you could join me on stage. I hope we're not confusing you with all the back and forth. Whoa, we got to stay apart. All right. So yeah, we're going to do a little bit of a fireside chat here. So I'll just kind of pull this here. If you want to sit there. I'm going to channel Charlie Rose for about 12 minutes. Those of you under 40, it's a guy who was on TV, PBS. Okay. All right. Here we go. Doctor, and you've asked me to call you Ash, so I will do so.
Call me Ash. Yeah, that's fine.
So physician, and I enjoyed the talk earlier of behavioral science. I always love going to meetings and you hear something you may have, you didn't think you were going to hear something on that topic. And one thing we were trying to do on this, which I think is a great way to talk about physician needs, is talk to a physician, right? Let's talk about kind of what your experience is, what you like, what you dislike, and what do we think an opportunity is going forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few questions talking about digital tools, social as well. You are on the advisory board of CIRMO. If those of you not familiar, CIRMO is a gated community for physicians, so you have some experience not just with social and digital, but with them as well as a platform. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about kind of social media and that world of digital information online to you as a physician. And we've seen all the studies, we know why physicians kind of go online and we parse and dissect all these different motivating factors and everything else that's happening. You know, do you go to the brand website for the pharma product or you prefer to go to Medscape? Tell me about kind of what you're doing in social from a perspective of, from your experience, when you look at it and say, this helps me do something faster, better, cheaper than the alternative. What does that look like today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me over here. Social media, we use it all the time, multiple times a day in front of patients. At the palm of our hands with a phone or the desktop computer, we could quickly alternate between EMR and social media. Now, I believe there's a survey done by CIRMO that showed that 50% of physicians will use social media platforms during work hours for professional use, not for personal use. Personally, I use social media when I'm looking for information on a medication, for example, how to administer a medication, dosage, usage, side effects. Maybe there's a pregnancy category, lactation category as well. So it's constantly being used, not just by myself, but by those all around me. And then, of course, we use the social media to then quickly make decisions and then parse information to the patient as well.
So just to build on that point, you mentioned kind of the integration with the EMR or EHR. Is that something relatively new? Because I think a lot of us kind of struggle with, you're making clinical decisions within those clinical workflow tools. Are these digital tools and external resources like social part of that workflow today?
Well, not necessarily social, but what we do have part of the EMR is something like UpToDate, if you may have heard. So we quickly hit on UpToDate, and if we want to remind ourselves of an information, maybe again, if somebody's aortic aneurysm is growing, what rate do we start to get worried for? So you can't memorize all the details. Is it 4.1 centimeters, 4.3 centimeters? It's very difficult when you're not seeing it every day, so you quickly go onto other databases to find that information. And then there's other tools. I'm on the CIRMO Medical Advisory Board that you could actually go onto that site and actually see what other physicians are thinking, what other physicians are doing when it comes to a specific condition, either condition or medication or side effect. You can also see what patients are thinking as well, based not directly from patients in Sermo, it's a physician site, but to see how other physicians are handling a particular patient issue. And so using other people's experiences to help you quickly and efficiently take care of the patient works for me.
So another information source that you're using as part of that process.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So let's talk about customer experience. And we've done a lot today, and you sat in some of the recent sessions here, and there's this term of customer experience and kind of predicting what the customer wants before they even tell you what they want, or having a pretty good idea what they want. What do you think about in terms of tools that you're using as it interfaces kind of with pharma? Some of these tools kind of in digital and social in general, kind of what's a go-to? What do you think is adding value today from your perspective?
What happens is when you're in training, in residency training, you're really up to date on everything from articles, journal articles, guidelines, you're on it. You just take the boards, you know everything, and a year later, memory starts to fade. Give it 20 years later, 30 years later, and constantly new medications, new innovations are coming. It's very hard to read all the journal articles that we're trained to do just because it's too many things. Literally in the last 10 years, you could count the different classes of diabetic medications that have come out. Very hard to keep up. These things work, that's why it's approved, but how does it work? How do they interact with each other? Very difficult to do. So sometimes digital media will assist us if they can clearly list the different categories of medications, and then we can easily work through it. Now, I've had pharmaceutical reps come to our office, and the old way of doing it was show us the tables, show us slides, and tell us, look, that this works better than that. These are the complications, and so on. And you get lost you get lost in all that data. What really works for me is the visual. I had a pharmaceutical rep come last week and was talking about Farxiga. And I said, I'd like to understand how something works. Not just tell me it works, but how does it work? And of course, the easy thing to do, the old way of doing it, was to just talk about it. But what this pharmaceutical rep did was take out their iPad and push a button, and a video came up. It was animated, and basically it showed in a visual sense of how this thing worked. Now, all day we're looking at charts. All day we're looking at data, talking to patients, typing notes. And to look at a short video, literally 2 minutes, of how Farxiga worked, that all of a sudden stuck with me. And I'm not sure how complicated it was for whoever created that video, but it was very effective and powerful versus just sending me data, and here's an article, read this article. Well, I'm not gonna have time to read it. So if anything, the digital media that's out there, if they can integrate things like videos that is designed for physicians, I think it'd be more powerful and effective than just numbers.
Excellent. So I'm going to go slightly off script here,
Okay.
but kind of building out. I'm not going to scare you. So you brought up the Farxiga, and one thing we kind of talk about as an industry is getting better predictive, right? Figuring out what you want. Let's imagine you went to the branded website by the pharmaceutical company. You did a search when you're logged into a particular publisher site.
Right.
What do you think if a rep-triggered email on that topic then comes to you from the manufacturer? Because the one thing that we kind of talk about as an industry is the creepiness factor. And we all know it, like when Amazon goes a little too far or sends the wrong thing, or Netflix gives you something, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't mean to watch that documentary. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how much is too much? Or would you have enjoyed a rep-triggered email from someone you had a relationship with saying, hey, I'll be in tomorrow, but here's some information ahead of time?
Well, if someone I know, a rep I know, reputable, were to contact me, it's very easy for me to then communicate back. If it was just an anonymous email based on the fact that I looked something up and now I get an email, then what happens is I'm constantly looking things up. We have to be accurate when we're taking care of patients, so we're constantly looking things up. And you can imagine if that was the case, we would get flooded with constant emails. So that could be a problem of receiving too many information overload or email overload. So I would probably, if I wanted more information, I'd like to have the choice of clicking a button and asking for it. And then I would be more triggered to read and view that information versus it being given to me without asking.
Excellent. And you used a key term. It's someone you had a relationship with.
Yes.
You've established trust there.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about valuing, placing a value on these relationships or investments in digital. So you as a physician, the brand's looking at it saying, hey, we need to invest in this, but we're not sure where we're going to extract that value back. When you think about kind of advice you would give to pharma marketers or brands that are sitting out there investing in these different digital tools, social media, et cetera, what are your thoughts on how do we measure the value of this? Should I be asking you your personal reaction to that, how it fit into workflow, or is this just really this is how I get my information today? If you don't deliver it this way, I'll get it from someone else this way.
So is the question, how do I measure the value of communication?
Yeah.
The digital communication?
Yeah, when they're looking at it saying, I have 15 different ways to contact you and different resources I can use, and I want to understand how you value each of those.
I guess one way, of course, the simplest way is probably to see how long we spend on that particular site or the communication tools. If I'm constantly looking at emails, that's probably shows that I'm actually looking at that. You never want to use personal phones, of course. The mailers get too much information. So how do you check the value of usage? I would probably say when a rep wants to communicate is to basically ask and make it simple. Get 3 or 4 choices and ask which tool would we like to be spoken with. So I think that'd probably be the way to do it. And then maybe you could measure. The question is, how do you quantify and how do you measure that? And I think that I don't have an answer for that one.
Well, I think you summed up well what I'm using and how often I use it. It's a pretty good measure. And I like your comment of permission-based, where I've opted in, this is a channel I like, continue using this, but
Right.
this is also, you're very comfortable with digital and other channels, other companies you deal with, for example. So the last one on this section, kind of, again, going back to kind of the experience part of it. When you think of some of those tools, and this is a little bit forward-looking, kind of some of those value, and we talk a lot about things that are experienced drivers, whether it's patient support programs that may support your patients, your ability to interact with medical affairs or these medical science liaisons or other parts of the company. There are other things that kind of come to mind where you say, these are kind of the top 2 or 3 things that either I'm using today that I really like from pharma, impacts my experience, or man, I wish they would get patient support right. I won't bring up prior authorization, so.
No. I like the latter part of your question of I wish they can. So I wish they can let us know in the office the first time we get it right of which medication the patient can receive. So we can write Dulera, but if the insurance doesn't cover it, 2 things happen. One, the patient will forget about it and not get it, and the healthcare continues to deteriorate. Or they will call our office, and then there's a whole slew of resource time usage that it takes place. The staff has to pick up the phone, take the message, call us. We have to review it when we get time, figure out at that point which insurance, and we can't really get it right. It's never an easy process to figure out which medication is covered by which insurance. So I wish there would be a way for maybe a pharma company to assist. If you have a certain medication, and we all know the insurance companies, say there's 10 of them in my area, basically let us know, because it's not a static information, unfortunately. Week 1 and week 12, the insurance company will change what they cover and what will they not cover. So I'd like a dynamic way in real time to understand what medication is covered. That's one. Second, I wish there would be a way for every patient, really of all socioeconomic class, I notice everyone has a smartphone. So wouldn't it be nice if there would be a way to have a QR code on a medication and ask the patient, take their phone right there in front of them and ask them to take the QR code and take a snap of that. And now it takes them to a patient-directed site for the patient to understand and learn about that medication. So here's a good example. Just last week, A patient came in and their asthma was just uncontrolled. And I teach the medical residents. And their next choice was, let's escalate medications to yet, a steroid plus, LABA. And I said, well, how do we know that the short-acting is not working? Well, the patient's using it, it's not working. Well, how do you know they're using it correctly? So we go in the room and I ask the patient to demonstrate to us how are they using the inhaler, and it was all incorrect. So it's like taking a pill and not swallowing it if it's not going to work. So I quickly educated the patient with the resident observing me that you have to inquire at all times how the patient is using this. Now, in a busy practice, it's really difficult to get down to that detail with the patients because you're constantly moving from patient to patient, and it takes time to show them how to use a medication. So what if you took a QR code and said, here, you snap the QR code on the patient's phone, go home and watch this video, animated video, how to take this. And all of a sudden, compliance increases and healthcare improves. And then the wastage also goes away because we're not given extra medications, side effects from extra medications, the financial cost to the patient, and everything else. So we can still stick to, so what I'm trying to say is the QR code. And you could use that. That's just one example of your QR code and demonstrate into a patient. And then you could do it for any other example as well you could come up with.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Doctor. We'll do the virtual clap here for the mini session. And you've been gracious enough to agree to sit on this final closing panel.
Okay.
So if Isabel, Tanya, and Quabina, I saw you come back in here. If you could join us on the stage and we'll do the final town hall wrap-up. We should do a real-time vote of CX experience, how you're liking this session. I don't know. I'll judge it by your body language. All right, here we go. Thank you. So we're going to build on those questions we had earlier. And Doctor, we discussed earlier, if there's some things you want to chime in on, you're more than welcome. And we're certainly going to ask you for your favorite CS experience at the end here. So I want to start off with, and I'm going to pick on Isabel and Quabina first, this framework. This idea, and I loved your joke, Tanya, earlier about, kind of the CRM and, is it CRM 5.0? We don't know. We're losing track. But the same idea holds true that, I guess I could probably just use this too. Oh, I'll stick with this. Never mind. It's better data, better technology. But this framework, and I'll start off, Kuna, we had a little bit of a conversation earlier today on some of these topics. Do you agree with this idea of this evolution? Kind of, you can put CRM before the multi-channel, I guess, but multi-channel to omni-channel to CX. Is it a linear progression? Is it iterative? Do these run in parallel? And I guess it's kind of this idea, could you have an omni-channel center of excellence and a CX center of excellence, and do these coexist? I know that seems like a little, strange question, but kind of, how do you see this evolution, this pathway? Ladies first. Oh, okay, Isabel.
For sure. No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. To be honest, always the goal was improve experience, right? I think when you talk about customer relationship management many years ago, relationship means I know you. Because of that, I want to have I want to give you a good experience, and everything else that come after that was focused on experience. The challenge in the past is that we didn't have multiple channels. We have the channel. After that, we start to have more channels. And the problem is that there are vertical interactions, not horizontal. Like they didn't talk with one another. That's the big challenge with the multi-channel. But I remember the beginning of the multi-channel was great. At least we have more channels to talk with the customers. But it's never an independent process. It's evolution to achieve one single goal that is improve the experience of our customers. And this is the reason that talk about Omni now is easy to talk, super difficult to implement, but in the same time is the path to achieve what we want is that deliver a better, not only experience in terms of the interface of the channels, but most important, the quality of the information that we deliver to our customers, as you mentioned, and to our patients, help them with their own treatment. I think that's not easily. They are evolution of what we want to achieve. That's the better experience.
Excellent. So now I'll pick on you. Do they coexist? Are these one and the same? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, I really like the way you kind of break up the question in terms of, is it a linear progression from multi-channel to omni-channel? From my personal experience, I think the progression is dictated by the need of the brand or the business, right? You have to really put the customer at the center of that thinking. You can't think that the organization has new technology, it's 2023, everyone's doing omni-channel. That's not a feasible way of getting there, right? The customer's needs have to dictate how you move through the stages. Now, the second part of that question is, can they coexist, right? I think it's really an iterative process from my perspective. You really always want to improve upon the customer experience, right? You want to start at point A, but eventually you want to map out the roadmap to excellent. I think, Karen, your slide had it this morning. It was really just getting to what excellent is or excellent experience from a customer experience standpoint. And I think that requires road mapping. You can't start at pillar 1 and jump to pillar 3. It has to be a natural progression, which is tied to the need of the customer. Does this service that we're rolling out serve the need of the customer while aligning to our overall roadmap for where the brand wants to go? So that's how I look at it. I think you had a third part of that question, which was tied to can they coexist together, right? When I look at multi-channel enablement, I really think business rule-driven activities. There is nothing wrong with starting at that pillar and really iterating and trying to learn before you move to an omni-channel approach that's driven by coordination or some type of algorithm, right? It has to be iterative, and before you go broad, I'm a believer that you go deep, right? So before you spread yourself extremely thin across multiple capabilities, it's important to really master one specific capability that's aligned to that overall roadmap. So I think it's an iterative process, and bringing it back home, it has to tie to the needs of your customers.
Excellent. Tanya?
Because it's been sitting in front of me, I'm really going to pick on the actual words. I think multi-channel and omni-channel are a progression, but customer experience, I believe, is something different. It sits underneath all of those. You're always going back to your customer experience. You may, in reality, not have the budget for every channel, but it doesn't mean that print or direct mail, going way back in my days, aren't as effective if you understand the customer experience and what their needs are. So I think the multi-channel to omni-channel are progressions, but I think customer experience is different.
Excellent. So I'm going to pick on you and stick with you. Let's go to the next one here. One thing we've done, like over the past couple of years, is we can talk omni-channel in theory, forever. But when you get down to the let's give use cases are always the best. And you hear a lot of really good ones of onboarding, right? Great omni-channel that compresses the onboarding cycle, whether it's Ozempic, Trulicity, Mounjaro, fill in the blank. I just mentioned 3 GLPs for some reason. So if we think about that as a category, what's your greatest example of how does omni-channel impact and improve the patient experience? Because it's a little hard on the adherence side, right, sometimes, but is getting the patient on therapy faster, is that really a patient experience metric when we think about why are we doing this?
I think it is a patient experience metric, and I think it's an important one, definitely, for them to get outcomes, is getting them onto therapy faster. And I think you do have to deploy omni-channel there because in our industry, there are multiple factors to getting them on therapy faster, and it's actually not just the patient. Picking on patient services is somewhat of a misnomer because some of those services are actually intended to support the physicians and physicians' offices to help patients get on therapy. And I do think that is part of that omni-channel ecosystem. So I think it is important to think about it that way, but that is only one metric, to your point. The other is helping patients stay on therapy in the broader use cases. And omni-channel is important there, depending on I think it's important all the way. Some therapy areas are more complex and require that. Some can be more basic in engaging with the patient if they're engaging back with you as needed in those. So I think there is an art to it as well.
Excellent. So Isabel, you talked about Connect 360, which is right in this space of, how do you deliver, the information? How do you get them on therapy? How do you keep them on therapy? What are your best examples when you say, how does all this innovation ultimately impact and improve patient experience?
Yeah, and I think the doctor explained an excellent one, like how to use, for example, from a barcode that you go direct to like a website that have a video that explain how to self-inject, or we have examples of that across the globe, but as well SMS reminding the patient how to, like, that they need to take the medication. And other times you see, because like the way that they consume specific information in the portal, how you can activate an email newsletter that explain more about some of the concerns that they have. That's really, as Tanya said, like, now we have opportunity to use more channels to reach more people, but not only reach more, but engage better. And include, I think, the future, and we have been explored that. The channels, not only the digital, the ones that we discussed now, connect devices. You'll be soon one way not only to receive information from what's happened with these patients, but help us to communicate with them. And I think this is the expansion of the channels. But again, the critical point is the coordination of them and how we understand, like, what kind of information is important in this specific moment, but as well coordinate across them how the experience has bringing value instead of be bombarded, as you mentioned, with so many emails or so many information. Like, it's really the ability to understand what make and add value for the patient and not only noise.
Excellent. Kwabena, what's your best example of how does next generation marketing, on the HCP side or consumer, but how does it impact and improve patient experience?
I really liked what you said earlier about the specific metrics that you're tracking, right? I think one could be the onboarding experience. I think the doctor had a great example where he talked about patient adherence through a QR code, right? I think the direct impact, like realistically, in terms of next-gen marketing's impact, it's made the patient experience that much more critical and relevant, because we now see that the patient's journey getting on therapy, there are multiple lynch points within that journey where we can influence with the work that we do through omnichannel, right? I think
Is it reducing friction or eliminating friction?
it's definitely through the process of trying to reduce as much friction, if it's onboarding on therapy very early on, or if it's SMS text late in the patient journey to keep you on therapy, right? Historically, that journey was mapped out in a separate silo. There's a DTC marketer who's responsible for that. But now, you can't roadmap the physician journey or experience without the patient experience, right? There's opportunities there to reduce friction across both. So when I look at, my overall investment in search, I'm thinking about what the physician's searching up, but also what the patient's searching up. Continually throughout the entire journey, these are the lynch points that we're trying to reduce friction, be it onboarding experience, starting therapy, or staying on therapy.
Excellent. So this is a tough one. It's covering a lot of area. It's basically, I threw everything in there of, wait, hold on. Did I go backwards? Oh, yeah, this is what I meant to go to, sorry. New technology, new data. And this is where you kind of throw, again, you can't do any event or meeting without some kind of AI component. But when we think about it, and I really like your comment, Tanya, was like the AI and the ML as we apply it to omnichannel is what makes a lot of this CX, reality and the patient experience, everything we're talking about. How are these impacting? And it's a little bit of a, pick your favorite buzzword out of this, but in reality, when we think about, one example, I guess, the reason this came to me was, we had a head of wearables in most company like 4 years ago, right? When the Apple Watch was like a reality and we're measuring heart and all these other things, we're like, oh, we're gonna have a glucose meter, this is gonna be crazy, we're gonna have wearable shirts. Like, how all these new technologies, when you think, a lot of those head of wearables now have other brand jobs. How do you think about kind of the new emerging tech and emerging data streams and how that impacts how you think about kind of next-gen omnichannel? And you're smiling, so I'm going to pick on you again. So
I'm smiling because that's a big one, and that's the million-dollar question. From my perspective, just to keep it, simple, I would say the direct overall impact is it's forcing us as marketers to get more innovative in our approaches. There's slides that we saw today that talked about making our businesses a little bit more like the Starbucks or the Amazons or the FedExes, right? I think in a more interconnected world with new technologies, new channels, and overall improvements in capabilities, it's forcing us to really think about what's that next message? What's that next step in the customer's journey, be it the physician or the patient? We now have more resources available to us. I remember at the start of my career about 10 years ago, I know I look young, I would sit and I'd be the guy looking at Excel spreadsheets across various channels, display banners, CRM, third-party media, and I'm trying to glean insight to figure out where do I take this insight and where do I push it downstream. Now in this new world, we have models, we have systems, we have orchestration engines that spit out those insights. So it's really up to us to really hone in on those capabilities, and it's challenging our thinking to what do we do with this data? Where do we action it? Or do we action it at all, right? And so I think that's the overall impact is in our approach. It's challenging us as marketers. Like the more advanced our systems get, the more visibility that we get, the more it challenges us to figure out how to package up those insights and how to optimize our overall marketing plans.
Yeah, and I like that comment Oz had earlier of the 5%. Like, we're not sure what we're doing with this, but we may do experiment a little bit. Tanya, I'll go to you, and I was just gonna pick on that QR thing. It was so funny because, you know, we were bombarded by QR codes like 10 years ago. They disappeared, and then COVID came,
pandemic.
and it was menus, right? We were forced to QR code every restaurant in existence. You know, you hear the term like, you know, new shiny penny, and, you know, again, I use the example of wearables, but how do you think about those kind of new innovative data technology channels? Is it a sandbox approach of, hey, we're trying to try these off to the side? You know, what are your thoughts on thinking about these, you know, what's next?
I think with the advent of more channels, more technology, it does put a lot of pressure on marketers to understand across those. I think marketers should be responsible for the overarching strategy. And to your point, your partners in the organization may go deep in wearables, may go deep in AI, may go deep in your CRM system, and you use them to pull it through. But it can't be siloed. You have to bring them all to the table. But as the marketer, you are looking at that orchestration across all of those things. And again, I think that does put a lot of pressure because you have to stay up to date. You have to understand the connections to them. There will always be new things coming out, and we have to keep adapting with those. So putting them off into a silo is difficult. It's my pet peeve about still having digital marketers. It's a channel. You don't have print marketers only. So the idea of having a digital marketer kind of is, you know, goes against that. And so I think marketers have to wear that omni-channel hat across all of those things going forward.
Good. So Isabel, we'll close out this section with you. And one thing that came to mind, and I'll kind of close, you know, bring back the comment that the doctor made about actually saying, how do you use that inhaler? You know, there were companies, actually one specific, that put a lot of money into digitizing the inhaler. Like a lot of tech on, you know, trying to capture this motion of actually just taking a puff. How do we think about the new, and how do you think about, you know, these new things that you think may enhance the patient experience, but, you know, some of these may not? But how do we keep up?
Yeah, that's a great comment. And I think all the technology that we see, and Tanya was covered that, really makes sense when we solve a problem. And we see with inhalers and other devices, is not only the fact that they are easy or better, but you need to explain, and we need to make sure that patients know how to use. But beyond of that is everything around. Like, we spend so many, as a pharma and industry, in develop new compounds and have like tens of millions of dollars to develop new things. But in the end, if the patient cannot access the drug or afford because they don't know how to navigate in the complexity of the paperwork and everything, is a waste. And I think if technology really focus on solve problems and make the life of the physician and the patient easy, that's the best use, and that's the best adoption. Because new trends will come all the time, but if they are not for a purpose to make the life of the patients easy and the doctors that are prescribing, no meaning. And I think this have been one of the problems, because we keep saying pharma is behind, but it's not to be like new tech. It's not about the new technology. It's about be relevant and be focused on solve problems. And I think that should be our goal, not digital markets, but solution. Our focus on how to really educate and support patients and physicians.
Excellent. So we're going to close it out with one of the best questions, and I love this question because it changes over time. And in CX, you go to anything outside of pharma or other industries, we tend to talk about who do we look towards, right? Everyone wants to give the example. For a while, it was Disney. Then they had some, you know, stumbles. You know, Apple, Starbucks. We had Starbucks today, right? It's going to predict. I actually read some article. The guy wrote his shortcut button on the phone geolocates when he goes near a Starbucks. It automatically puts his order in at the closest Starbucks. I was like, a little too much for the experience quotient. Let's talk about kind of your great customer experience. And I want to start with the doctor. We chatted a little bit before, gave you a little bit of time to, some people think it's Ritz-Carlton, some it's American Airlines, some it's not Spirit for anyone. No, anyway, sorry. So doctor, who do you think of when you think of the North Star of customer experience, and maybe even thoughts on how that relates back to healthcare and pharma?
It's on.
Yep.
Okay. So you asked me this question earlier, and I thought about it. It didn't take me that long. And the company that I thought was the North Star of experience is Qatar Airlines. Some people say Qatar, say Qatar. But Qatar Airlines, they anticipate. You get there and everything is really smooth from the check-in process to onboarding, and then you're on the plane. Just because you're in coach, they don't treat you, second class, and so on and so on. So that experience is tremendous. And this summer I traveled twice. Well, once in the spring and then again in the summer. And the Qatar airline experience was second to none. And then I get on American Airlines with the family. And even though we ordered on vegetarian, they ordered the pre-meals. We're in advance. Everything's confirmed, and we're row number 8 or something, and they said, "Oh, we ran out." I'm like, how can you run out? And we're traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, are we and my kids, are we not supposed to eat for the next 6 hours? Just because, what do you mean you ran out? We're on row 8, and we ordered. Whereas that would never happen with Qatar Airlines. So the anticipation, and I think if you had to relate it back to medicine, is anticipating the needs of the customer. The customer, I guess, is the patient, is the doctor or the healthcare provider, and being able to anticipate what we need to make things efficient, effective, and overall improve healthcare would be tremendously beneficial if that can happen.
And I like that. It's knowing what's important to you and making sure you get those right when they rank high for you. Isabel, same question, kind of that North Star, and tie it back to health and pharma.
Yeah, instead of talk about company, I will talk about Dr. Nakamura. Dr. Nakamura was the doctor in my community that helped us. They knew us, they understand our needs, they used to really have time to sit and explain things for me, for my mom, for my grandma. And most important, they really listen. And they really care about us. And I think this is the best experience that I remember from my childhood. And to be honest, because every time we have a new company, I went to the Disney Institute, I went to the Apple Experience Design Lab. All this is cool, but what really miss now for pharma is this strong focus on trust, understand, and care. And I think we're supposed to be, in the future, pharma, the stars or North Star for others, because we should be and supposed to be the trust and the care that help people and improve their lives. And I think, for me, this is what we should focus as a future.
Nice, and I like your example of the doctor. You used a keyword, listen. And I think that's one of those key things that is missing from some CX programs is if you don't have a feedback loop, how do you do CX? Tanya, North Star, and tie it back to health and pharma.
I get to cheat because I get to talk to clients about this usually. So my example is actually Amazon, but not for the reasons that you think. Everybody really likes the Amazon experience. We have a lot of clients who talk about that, but it's not for the predictive nature. It's for the transparency. Right? When you place your order, you know when the retailer has received it, you know when they're preparing to ship it, you know if there's been a problem with your card or in the payment process, you know that it has reached the post office or whatever service that they're using. Now I know if it's 10 stops away, right? And when it has arrived or if there's an issue with that. The transparency and expectation setting is what everybody falls back to when they talk about Amazon. In the pharmaceutical company, you're not going to recommend me another drug. You don't need to anticipate what comorbid condition I have. But knowing that my prescription is going to get filled, what time it will be filled, not as in the day of time, but like, is it getting through the PA process? Did the payer approve it? Is it going to be 2 weeks that I'm going to get that, or is it going to be next week? And being able to provide that transparency. And we can do that today as an industry, but it requires connection and coordination. But there's nothing limiting it but us. So I think it is achievable.
Yeah, that's a great example for not the reasons most people expect, and that's a lot of data integration, what you just said. That's a lot of hard work, what you're saying. If that is the experience where the transparency, and I'm guilty of stalking the Amazon driver when they're pulling up.
And
I
it
see
builds
I
trust
see you
with them.
coming. Okay. You get to close it out. North Star and tie it back.
This is a tough one, but I see it's almost time for drinks, so I'll keep it short. One of the things that this question comes to mind is actually, I struggle with it because I think within our space, we're always so hungry for an analog to compare to because MLR, legal, regulatory, compliance, they always need an example to help visualize things. I think if you listen to the three answers here, there's a thematic theme of transparency, understanding the customer need that's at the center of things. So rather than looking for direct analogs, because I could tell you, Nike, it's been 6 months since I used their mobile application. A day ago, they sent me a notice on the day saying, it's been a while since we've seen you, right? So I could refer to them as an application that's really, they've mapped out the journey, they've understood a touch point where they want me back on the application, they've sent a notice, their data infrastructure is clearly really strong. So I challenge us to kind of go beyond the brands and kind of look at the solutions, like the way they're solving certain problems. Let's look at a Domino's, even tracking your pizza being made. It's similar to the example that you just made of, we don't need to tell them what's the next drug that they may take, but just understanding the process or visibility into this form was sent here, it's in this step, that could be a massive improvement to our process. And so I just challenge us in this room because sometimes a consumer answer will never come for us because we have legal, we have compliance, we have regulatory to answer to, right? But thinking about how some of these brands that we look at solve the problems that they're faced with, I think you can glean a lot more from that.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant, and just trying to bring it together in my head, it's, you know, when we think experience and kind of omni-channel Enlighten, we think about things like dynamic content and 50-plus channels and doing more. I heard listen, transparency, predict what I want in advance. You don't have to overwhelm me with the signal-to-noise ratio, just get it right. So with that, hopefully we brought a few of the key points together. And with that, I don't know if I'm supposed to turn it over to Simon or just you kick the doors open and run. But thank the panel again.
Thank you, Mark, Corbina, Tanya, Isabel, and Dr. Rana. That was excellent. That was a great wrap-up. I'm going to just speak for probably less than 1 moment because I know I'm